My name is Aneesa. I would like everyone to take a quick moment and think about a really nice time with someone you love. Just a really good moment. Like in that moment, you were like, I'm happy, this is wonderful, life is great. Everyone has it? Great, cool. Now, think about that person being taken from you. Killed, to be specific. Think about what you would feel in that moment. Likely anger toward the person who did it. Sadness, obviously. Grief. It's natural. Now that those feelings are here, they're present, I need you to compartmentalize them and put them away. Put them in a box in your mind and leave them there and think about the criminal next. Throughout the duration of the speech, those feelings are going to be present, but they cannot drive the dictation of what should happen to this person. I spent the past few weeks researching how the U.S. handles criminals. I have also spent the past few months studying psychology and the different mental disorders that could be predecessors to committing a crime. First, though, I would like to talk about the initial intention of the imprisonment system. Dr. Reeves stated in the 2024 article, Alternative to Incarceration and Sentencing Commission, The History of Imprisonment. Prior to prison systems, those who committed crimes were corporal punishment is what was used. They were physically hurt or sentenced to their death. Groups such as the Quakers advocated for the alternative solution of imprisonment for the ability for rehabilitation. Being in prison would mean retribution to whoever the crime affected and incapacitation and rehabilitation for the criminal. At first, this worked. It was a good solution. And then the system became a profit system, and it was criminally abused, in my opinion. Those who were put in prison were demonized and dehumanized. I first have to point out that a large margin of criminals have pre-existing mental conditions or a history of being abused themselves. However, these factors are only taken into consideration when the defendant is not competent to stand trial. The issue with that is that a lot of mental disorders that people have when they commit crimes do not show poor cognition, such as major depressive disorder, persistent depressive disorder, bipolar, and even schizophrenia. A lot of people are misconstrued about the fact that schizophrenics are only delusional and have poor cognition during a schizophrenic episode. Other than that, they are likely to have great cognition and competent to stand trial, which could be an issue. All of these conditions that I've studied for months in my abnormal psychology developmental 3rd edition textbook. Knowing that most criminals have a pre-existing illness, they should help the individual if they have a pre-existing illness. But they don't. They don't look at that, they overlook that. Dr. Beckett in 2022 released an article called The Effects of Imprisonment. In that, they described the conditions of imprisonment. Horrible quality, horrible food, no sunlight or fresh air for the majority of the day. I believe it's 1 hour spent outside. And those correctional officers, or COs, treat them like animals because they're in prison. It's torture, not reform. These conditions, these living conditions, will only do one of two things: exacerbate your current mental illness or give you a new one. Does that sound humane to any of you? even though they committed a crime. It's inhumane. And now you're released. Say you don't have a life sentence. You're released back into society without being provided any psychiatric care during or after. You now have a record and a stigma from the rest of the United States. You can't get a job if you have a felony. A lot. Some will offer you a job, but not a livable wage. You also can't even get an apartment if you have a misdemeanor on your record, let alone a felony. What would you do in that situation? You can't work, you have nowhere to live, and nowhere to go. You're likely to reoffend. Thus, a demoralizing cycle is put in place for imprisonment. All stated by Dr. Kuna in The Impact of Imprisonment on Individuals' Mental Health and Society Reintegration. To be clear, incarceration is needed, but it needs to change. Everything I'm about to state was referenced by Dr. Reeves in the 2024 article, Alternatives to Incarceration and the Sentencing Commission. Currently, not every inmate across the board has access to educational programs as they should. They can no longer further education once you are imprisoned. You are paid cents to work, even though a lot of what prisoners do goes back into society. You are paid cents to barely get ramen in commissary. You should be allowed more than 1 hour outside, in my opinion. You should be allowed to have at least a minimum wage if you're in prison, especially if you're going to be contributing to society from prison. This is controversial, but those who have a life sentence should not be treated inhumane. They should essentially have the life that we live, just not in society. And what is meant by that is that they should be able to have a bed. They should be able to have a TV to be kept up to date about how the world is changing. They're never going to experience it any other way. They should be able to go outside as normal even though they are contained in a cage. They should be able to work out, to study, to have normal things. I mean, really the only thing that is taken away is that you can't travel and you won't have contact with people who you are likely to hurt. It's inhumane for someone to spend the rest of their life in a box, in a cold box, treated like an animal. It's no way to live, and no one should have to experience that. Yes, they committed a crime, but who are we to take away someone's human rights for that? In conclusion, we established what imprisonment was originally meant to do, where the lines got blurred, the negative effects it currently has due to the nature of prison, and what needs to change. Such as I made you all do throughout this speech, the world needs to compartmentalize feelings, innate feelings of vengeance towards someone who has harmed another human, and look at the root of the criminal. Look at what could have happened. What could they have been through? There's a lot of controversial cases that would be a speech on its own that some people are in a debate about on whether or not years of abuse constitutes murder. But what mental conditions were created throughout that abuse that could have premeditated this? It's just not fair to say that someone has no shot at redemption, or to say they have no shot at redemption and then treat them like an animal in a life sentence. That is my speech.